So I think just giving, having whatever you're doing, whether it's real estate or whatever, if you want to be ultra successful, it takes a lot of perseverance and push. And if you have the right mentors that have been successful, you can prevent going down the wrong path and wasting a lot of effort.
Welcome to Work Inspired, a podcast where leaders in business, commercial real estate, technology, and design come together to discuss change, challenge, and opportunity in today's professional world. This show is powered by BOS, a leader in commercial interiors. The team of workplace experts at BOS is equipped and ready to help you navigate the path to your next workspace. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out in your career, you're going to learn something new today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and get ready to work inspired. Welcome back to Work Inspired. We've got a great episode today. Meg Epstein, the CEO of CA South, a commercial real estate firm that's doing some incredible things in the Southeast, is here to talk to us. It's going to be a great conversation. Let's get started. Meg, thanks so much for being with us here on the show today. So excited to speak with you about what you're doing with your business. I appreciate your time and thanks for being on Work Inspired.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So we like to start by having each guest kind of give a little bit of a background or talk about their professional story a little bit. So tell me how you got started and how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. I graduated college in 2008 from UCLA, and I knew I wanted to do something in real estate development, but there weren't any jobs at that time. So I was actually going into finance and derailed that and got a job by running through Bel Air and talking to GCs. They were building these big luxury homes, and I ended up getting a job as a project manager on a job site building a 60,000 square foot French chateau, and learned construction that way from being on the job site for several years and project management and a lot of really, integral things that I still use today in terms of how to build things. And I did that. And then when I moved to Nashville in 2016, so 8 years later, I was doing mainly high-end homes. I did that in the Bay Area as well. There wasn't a luxury home market like I had experienced in California, where the homes were $20 or $30 million. And so I branched into construction, into commercial development, and did my first ground up condo deal on the water here in Nashville, which I also found on a run actually, but just kind of went, head first into that. And it's been it was a great shift. And now, we have over $1 billion under development, and mainly do industrial and mixed use urban infill type product.
Oh, it's 2008 seems like an interesting time to get into residential real estate. How was that? Right as the housing market crash was about to happen or happening.
I know. It was great because I ended up going into such an insulated field because people, celebrities and really wealthy people in LA it was actually a really great time to build if we're in that situation. So, and it was just it's a whole asset class dealing with people like that and all the consultants that go into homes. It's so much harder than building commercial like I do now. So definitely set me up.
Well, clearly a lot of development happening in the Nashville area, but what kind of inspired your move out to Nashville from California?
I actually met my husband. He was from San Francisco and he was living here. So I just picked up and moved pretty quickly after coming. And I loved the feeling of when I first came, we went and listened to live music, and it was still very small then when you could park at the airport and, just pull up, and you could park on Broadway and go to a honky tonk. Now it's crazy, but it's still, very endearing as a city.
Cool. So is that when you started CA South?
Yeah.
Back when you moved there? Yeah. What kind of sets you apart? What makes CA South unique?
I think we always had it. I think it helped that I had an outsider's perspective when I came to Nashville. There's a ton of national developers and people from New York and people, coming from everywhere now. But when I moved here, that was 6-7 years ago, I had a pretty fresh perspective on not only modern design and more elevated architecture that I didn't see in the South, but also just, what areas were cool. Like if you talk to a local Nashvilleian, they would tell you that the water was, you didn't want to be on the water. And that's really weird. And, they think of it as an industrial utility. And I thought of it, I'm from San Francisco, we spent a lot of time in Chicago, New York. I'm going, well, of course you want to be on the water. And so that's helped the success of my developments because I kind of have an outsider's perspective without the preconceived notions. I mean, people thought I was overpaying for land that was adjacent to downtown. It was very obvious to me that you have a downtown and you have all these neighborhoods that had already sort of gentrified. Of course, in between is going to close in on itself, and that kind of outsider's perspective, I think helped me a lot. Also, my team is all from New York and California. And I think it helped having that sort of sophisticated hustle where, the barrier or the cost of living or the lifestyle you can live in Nashville is really accessible. And so, someone could be work and at a bank and their wife could stay at home and they could have 2 kids pretty comfortably and golf on Fridays. And so when I'm coming in and working 80 hours a week, I was able to really get a lot farther more quickly in the trajectory of my company. So
excellent. I think I read on your website one of the kind of ways that you set yourself apart is to take West Coast design and bring it to other areas of the country. And you've talked about the importance of location, which I think is something we hear about in real estate and development a lot. So very important. But what else makes kind of West Coast design special or unique or something that's worth spreading throughout to other areas like Nashville?
I think, what I try to do is I work with architects that either came from a really big, well-known house and they spun off on their own, or I try to take design elements, I guess, from California. For me, it's really about efficiency and bringing modern design. I've never wanted to be a luxury builder after coming from that world. So the product type I'm delivering is for the middle market. And I just believe that you can, with modern design, achieve a really high aesthetic without having to spend a lot. I'm not talking, if everybody's putting all the same white tile in a subway pattern, I can straight set it and maybe choose one that's slightly different. It doesn't have to cost more, but there's just things you can do to make a product better that's a little more thoughtful. And so I think that comes out in our projects. And so for me, it's just about having it be like a clean, efficient space that's well thought out, that I would think I would want to live in, is sort of how I approach all my projects. And I think that was sort of missing here. I mean, I think people it's more like a commodity building business in a lot of cases. Not as much anymore. I've seen really great projects come out of the ground or be announced, but it's not as imaginative for sure. It's just it was a lot less competitive.
Yeah, in our business, we do a lot of commercial spaces and we build out workspaces as part of our company. And we're constantly working with the commercial real estate community and the architectural and design community. Do you find it's important in your position to have a solid understanding of design and architecture so that you can make more informed decisions?
I think so. People in this market, you can build a lot and get away with it and it'll be successful. But I think it just depends on what your goals and objectives are. If you're trying to really, change the way that people live and work in their spaces, like I am, then I think it takes a lot more thoughtfulness for sure. And it's challenging in this market with obviously supply chain issues and construction costs and all of the things we're facing with inflation. So.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. The last couple of years have brought about a lot of change in many industries. And I think as we emerge from the pandemic, certain issues still are present, but I think one trend that is probably here to stay is the concept of a hybrid workforce or a hybrid world, which is obviously a blend of home or residential and work or commercial. And you've kind of got a little bit of experience in both spaces. Have you kind of picked up any insights or have you seen any shifts between the two types of markets, whether it's your multifamily or your residential kind of work and then the commercial spaces that you're developing?
Yes, I would say on the commercial side or the industrial side, that just is, a lot of our projects support last mile or logistics as things go more and more online. So that's a trend that is obviously been happening and just sort of exacerbated by the pandemic. But I would say that on the multifamily side, I think real estate is a business is always slow to pivot, but we've incorporated things that we were already kind of thinking with before the pandemic. And then I was able to get, I have a public REIT investor and institutional investors, and I have to get them on board with things like larger floor plans in an urban setting. It's hard to, when you're doing the numbers, underwrite that to where I'm going to say, oh no, I'm going to get more for this 2-bedroom. I'm going to get over $3,000 a month for this 2-bedroom, but it lives a lot better for, say, a family, or if 2 people are working at home, because there's, built-in cabinetry in the bedroom that can be an office space. Then there's a den that can be a second office space. And so we try to really not just mill out the same product type that gets done by institutional investors, and really think about, okay, yeah, people are going to be at home more. How can we make the spaces live better for that and accommodate, offices or more than one office if it's 2 people staying at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because at the start of the pandemic, I don't think many people could predict what was going to happen. I thought the housing market would crash, and it went the other way. And now as companies kind of rethink or strategize for their return to office, or what does the future of work look like at their organization, we're seeing a whole mix of different types of plans. Some people are consolidating and shedding some of their portfolio. Some are adding. Others are kind of just staying and waiting and watching and trying to learn. But it's a really interesting time. So especially in a world like yours, where, like you just said, it's a bit of a slow pivot or a longer lead time. You got to get a lot of people on board. And traditionally, commercial real estate, or real estate in general, has been something that you need to, look 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. How are you guys looking to the future, the next 5 years, and making smart decisions for your investments?
I think, well, we do pivot very quickly. I think that's what's really been a core tenet of our success, and that we have several platforms. So right now, for example, with everything that's happening in the geopolitical environment, the supply chain, I'm really focusing, going a lot more heavy on industrial at the moment, because it's much easier right now to build 2 walls and a roof than it is to get 300 sinks and cabinets and all the things to a job site. And just, and frankly, I monitor a lot of just the basic absorption, supply, demand. We do market studies. I really try to keep up with that and not just be like, oh, I build 300 unit apartment buildings all around the Southeast, and that's what we do, and we've done it for 30 years. And that's great, but I don't think you're going to get the type, our track record returns are really, really opportunistic. And so I don't think you're going to get that without pivoting. So for me, I'm looking at, I see the future in the Southeast, having lived my entire life between New York and California. I'm going to pretty much stick to the Southeast. So I see my future there. I think industrial logistics has very long legs in the next couple of years to support all of just urban infill, urbanization, businesses moving out of urban cores, and as we go more online. And then I think I'll always be, one of my market study people, someone I do a market study with, he's really great. He's sort of like my oracle. He told me, in, I think it was January of 2020 or something, that all the millennials are going to want to move to the suburbs. And I said, you're crazy. No way. Like it's all about urbanization and walkability. And then of course there was this mass exodus to the suburbs. But for me, I really care about creating urban cores where people can live, work, shop, walk, recreate, send their kids to school, and do that in a walkable environment. And so that is going to be our focus, and bringing that sort of forward thinking urbanization to hopefully other markets. We're going into Huntsville now and Chattanooga and slowly progressing out. But I think those markets that are, say a decade behind Nashville, if we're a decade behind Austin, could use a lot of our product types. That's kind of where I'm focusing on.
And are you seeing that plan play out? Because obviously there was a lot of move out to the suburbs. I want more space. When we're in a quarantine or people are spending all their time in their home, that's reasonable. But as the restrictions have been lifted and people are venturing out more, are the urban environments returning to their pre-pandemic kind of growth trajectories?
I think they are in secondary markets like Nashville. I don't know. After going through the pandemic and just visiting, and I have a lot of family in California and New York and stuff. I just I think it's really given people pause about paying to live in a city like Chicago or New York or San Francisco, and dealing with all of the issues that have risen up because of the pandemic. And so I would say in primary markets, that's probably going to be, a longer lasting effect. But I've really been in a bubble in Nashville. I mean, so many people have moved here through the pandemic. So we didn't have a slowdown in, apartment absorption or things like that. I think if anything's influenced our market, it would be interest rates. You're starting to see some slowdowns and things like that just in the last quarter. But I think at least in secondary markets, urban cores, they're still accessible. I mean, I live right downtown. It takes me 5 minutes to get anywhere. I can plug in my Tesla once a week. You know what I mean? So it's still, even though I live in a city of Nashville, it's not like living in New York and dealing with, needing a dinner reservation 2 weeks out and it being so expensive that you can't live a balanced life.
That makes sense. You've talked about a few of them already, but kind of post-pandemic trends in your world. What are some of the major ones that you're seeing? I think you talked about the ability to pivot and the pace of change. We talked a little bit about urban versus suburban. But what else are you kind of seeing or planning for as a result of coming out of the last 2 years and moving into the post-pandemic world?
I feel like I'm in the middle of Atlas Shrugged. It feels like, honestly, it's really tough to get people to go to work. It's really hard I'm renovating. I'm doing several personal projects, but we're building our office headquarters in the Nashville right now, which is a smaller scale project. I would say for, my larger GCs that are doing $100 million deals, we've been very fortunate to be able to coordinate and pivot through this. But for the smaller projects and just more of the day-to-day, I mean, it is a really interesting shift that's happened. I think to get people to go to work in an office, it's going to have to be a pretty decent experience. You're seeing a lot more demand for Class A, highly amenitized sort of office experiences for people. I think the hybrid lifestyle you mentioned, which as a CEO, I'm okay with. I think it really depends on the job. While we were in between our offices and just at certain points, I've been, I say, hey, we're going to work remote for 2 weeks, and then half the team just flees off to Europe or other places. And I'm just wait a second. Like, you still have to visit your job sites and stuff like that. So I think the hybrid lifestyle is definitely here to stay. We've developed our own parameters around it to where I think people can stay productive. And I think that's, it's healthy in a lot of ways. Some people are more productive working at home, but I do think you need a balance. I don't think office is going to go away completely. And I have seen especially in the Southeast, that it's a bit more old school in terms of returning to office than you're seeing in more of the primary markets. And it's just, as I mentioned already, it's a lot more accessible. It's not costing anyone that works with me to $50 a day to commute to work or park. You know what I mean? They can they can get to work in 15 minutes and park for free, So those are the sort of barriers I think that just the overall lifestyle will change. But I hope that my core tenets of walkability, green spaces, all of those things are, will continue to be a trend. When I first moved to Nashville, I really felt like parks were, highly neglected. And finally the city started getting on board going, hey, we're growing massively. We don't have the infrastructure to support. We're going to end up a concrete jungle if you guys don't, sort of organize and work with developers more. So I think the idea of wellness living, walkability, green spaces, all of these things are a trend that is really going to be important for a lot of secondary markets anyways, that don't have the infrastructure with all these people coming in.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of things there. I think, kind of given your story coming from California and kind of bringing some of that experience and knowledge and insight into a city like Nashville, same thing with some of these return to office strategies. Just yesterday, Elon Musk talked about, basically we're bringing everybody back. And you look at, companies in California, often the tech companies that trend set and people look towards as kind of forward thinking. Some of them are fully remote. Some of them are saying we're coming all back. Everybody's got a bit of a different strategy. And I think you're exactly right. It's finding the balance and finding what works best for your team and being able to offer that choice and flexibility and well-being that is work-life balance, but also making sure that your company keeps moving forward and the people are there, because there is a benefit to being together in person or being on the job site, right? And not doing everything remotely. So I love that perspective.
I see Elon's tweet that pretending they can pretend to work else. He's hilarious, but
I know. I thought that was funny too.
I would say what we've done, or what it's forced us to do, is really develop a system for KPIs and, online project management, and a way to really manage. Like, I don't care as a CEO if someone's really getting things done, but how do I really know that, So coming up with a bit of a reporting structure, or, more measuring, then I feel better about people being off in Europe and working from there. It's when I kind of feel like people are just, it's like total anarchy that you start getting stressed out. But
I hear you. And that's obviously one of the problems. You say getting people to come to work, obviously finding talent, retaining talent. That's a big hardship right now too. And we'll see if that maintains. But I think that's part of the whole equation is, what does a business leader want versus what does their team want, and finding kind of a balance between those two things as well, especially, at this point in time. I want to talk a little bit about technology, and this specifically around any technologies that you're seeing as part of smart buildings or in some of your developments. We just had a guest on the show who is a facility leader for Honeywell, and they just built a huge campus in Charlotte, and he called it the smartest building in the world. And obviously that's what they do. But we talked a little bit about kind of the technology that's now going into new developments that capitalizes on some of the advancements we've seen in sensors and in automation, and basically smart buildings that create a better sense of well-being and can attract people back into a commercial space. Do you have any perspective on that? Are you guys leveraging any sort of new technology or emerging technology in your developments?
If you compare it to a primary market, it's probably not considered very high tech, but I would say for Nashville, we really try to, one of the main things is we use a latch key system that is really user friendly in terms of getting in and out of the building with your phone, and being able to send codes and set up automations if you have, your cleaning lady coming or something like that, like people visiting. And so that's something that's really made a difference. And I live in a very high end condo building now that doesn't even have that. I'm just like, if my middle market condo apartments have that, like we should, so that's something we definitely incorporated. obviously we always use Nest thermostats for all of our apartments, which is kind of, I don't know if that's a standard or an upgrade. I've noticed a lot of our like more gym spaces we pretty much exclusively use Peloton equipment now. And instead of using a lot of the heavy, we've just kind of gone more to like the Mirror and Peloton model where people, have their login and then they can have we call it a Peloton studio instead of a gym, but it's basically just a more techie feeling gym that's lighter and not so, it doesn't have all the like life fitness machines and everything. Yeah. So that's kind of the way that's off the top of my head, what I can think of that, and just being able to access the controls with your phone in your space. But again, we're not really focused on very high end. So, that's like the main things that we've limited it to. And locker systems, for example, like the mailing locker systems. We also use a service that picks up more like convenience, like dry cleaning. And we partner with a CSA, things like that. To convenient.
Yeah, it's interesting because the things you just talked about are obviously, residential sounding, like a Nest thermostat and the, Peloton, or even mail pickup for lockers. I bet you that we start to see some of those same technologies come into the commercial spaces because there's a lot of intention to make work feel more like home because of what's just gone on. I mean, that was a pre-pandemic trend as well, but I think it's been accelerated. So, when we talked to Honeywell, it was all about, HVAC systems and sensors and lighting and, and utilization data and things for facility leaders. But I could see some of this technology that you just mentioned making its way into the workplace to entice people to come in to say, see, we've got the same type of stuff that you have at your home, plus all this other stuff. So, yeah, it would be nice to have. Would you call it a Peloton studio?
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
we just try to make things streamlined, but I agree that I'm sure we'll be seeing more of the, HVAC and lighting. I mean, we always try to go more with green and LED lighting and things like that. That's kind of the given these days. So that's good.
I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm interested in your perception on if I'm a business leader and I'm trying to decide where I want my workspace to be, whether it is in a city or a suburb, that urban environment or the suburban environment. Do you have a recommendation without knowing anything else about my fictitious company?
I was just going to say, I think it really depends. So I'm actually an office project in suburbs that's been doing very well for people that for owners that want to own their office, and which is a trend that we've seen a lot more of people wanting with cap rates, compressing to where they were and rents getting so expensive. And I did that in the suburbs because one, you're getting more, accountants and insurance companies and people like that have, they're not super high growth businesses. They know what spaces they're kind of going to need. And a lot of times the owner can afford to buy, they're buying the office and then they're leasing it out. So for a more conservative sort of business, I would recommend that, right? For me, the breadth and core of what I do is urban. And so I have to have somewhat of an urban space, but it's very centralized to the suburbs and hopefully accessible. I think my farthest general counsel lives like 30 minutes from our new office or something. That's like the farthest, it takes me about 6 minutes to get to work. So, so I would say it really just depends if your model is more of a, conservative and where your employees are coming from, I would go suburbs, which I totally understand that. But for us, or if you're in tech or want to appeal to, younger people, I would say more of an urban environment, which I guess is two answers, but.
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting answer because kind of what you're saying is think about where your people are at or the people who you want on your team and be close to them. And and combining that with the concept of remote or hybrid, or the employee that, like you said, just goes off to Europe when you say, we have some remote time. It's interesting. So I think part of it's probably, what does your hybrid strategy look like? How often are you going to have people actually in the space, right? Or in what
Right.
manner? So great.
And your clients, right? Like, I don't know what kind of business you're running, but we don't really have clients. So I could pretty much, it can be more my preference, but obviously if you have clients, that's something else as well.
But I'm guessing yours is also very much a relationship-based business. And so you're going to want to be able to be, in person for those important meetings or those investor decisions. I'm just assuming. Or have you found that over the last couple of years, those types of conversations are just as effective, or those relationships are just as easy to build via a Zoom call?
I don't think they are. I did appreciate during the pandemic when I was able to raise a lot of money just over Zoom and not have to wine and dine and do the whole thing. But it's just not the same. And I mean, I think I got my first $100 million deal funded during the pandemic, all over Zoom, never met anybody, got a commitment for $40 million.
Wow.
That was really great. And that was all done over Zoom. So it can be done. But that was in the height of the pandemic. And, it's just not the same when you need to build relationships, especially with your investors, if they're going to be we try to develop programmatic investor relationships. And, I don't want to take money from someone I don't know. And obviously they don't want to do it without coming. So there was an allure of the pandemic. And I do think it has lightened up to where it doesn't have to be like, oh, we need to come out. Maybe it's half the amount of trips or a quarter of the amount of trips. But so again, it's sort of that more fluid environment. But I think for me, where our office is placed, it was I think we have probably 8 projects within a few miles. So, that's also part of it too, living and breathing building.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, when we were all in a lockdown scenario and we all had to be remote, that's one playing field, right? But then when there's the option to be remote or in person, and maybe some of your competition or the relationships are being built elsewhere, if you're remote, it'll be interesting to see when there's choice, what people choose, or what seems to be effective when it's not all or the one or the other. Well, this has been great. I like to finish each conversation with a couple, I guess, more personal questions. You can still keep them professional if you'd like, but whether personally or professionally, what's something you're looking forward to in the next 12 months?
Personally, that's easy. I'm going to Europe and for the first time in a couple of years. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been, so very excited for that. I really love going to Europe, but obviously so going to Paris with my husband and going sailing after that. Cool. Exciting. For me, I have been trying to get our headquarters done. I've been on the job site the last week every day with the guys, like pushing cabinets and things like that. So I'm really excited for the beginning of Q3 for my company. We'll all be in a headquarters. We were in a WeWork for 6 months and it was supposed to be 2 months. And so I think for us, it's time to hunker down, definitely, given the environment. We have a few very large master plan. We have 2 over, $300 million deals in the pipeline that are larger master plans, which we've never done, and bringing in a team to do that. And so that's super exciting for us. So I think for me, it's really just being settled in a headquarters with my whole team there on whatever schedule they're going to be in the office. But really looking forward to mapping out the rest of the quarters to do these larger scale projects in Nashville. So
cool. Well, you've had a lot of success and some great experience. It sounds like you've got, some pretty impressive plans for what's coming next. I'm interested, has there been a resource or something that's been valuable to you in your professional success that you could recommend to others?
If they're interested in real estate development, I always recommend the CCIM courses. Those were very helpful for me. I had no background in underwriting or finance, besides accounting, but any relevant experience to I didn't learn anything in college that helped me basically. So that pretty much gave me the vocational tools for real estate that I think are just really great if you're a broker or an investor or, want to do any sort of development. So that was very helpful for me. I think finding mentors. I have a board who are basically just 5 mentors to me. It's more formalized in a board, but I've always had mentors, and that doesn't mean anything other than getting someone to commit to taking your calls every now and again, or having a lunch with you once a month that you admire and want to be like. So that's something that's very important to me. And I also read a lot. I read a lot. I've read probably every book there is on successful real estate people. So I don't think people read enough anymore. Sad. I actually made the team read Atlas Shrugged. I'm making them do it right now because I'm like, this is what's happening. But, those type of things.
Well, I see the books in the background of your shot there. I do think that is a consistent thing we hear. Lots of reading, lots of continued education and mentor groups. And that's my final question, actually. Let's say you were retiring tomorrow. You're just going to go to Europe and sail around the world for the rest of your days. What's some knowledge you'd drop on anyone who you were mentoring, or anyone who was filling your shoes once you left the business?
I know this was a tough one. I think it sounds trite, but just, really perseverance. I don't see the level of perseverance and push. And frankly, in the younger generation, I'm like talking like I'm so old, but really, I did this by cold calling all my investors. I didn't have any money or any capital relationships. And I picked up the phone and I called thousands of people until I got my first deal funded. And I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars that way. All my investors, I cold called them. Not one personal connection, maybe one personal connection that was after I already had built more of a track record, right? But so I think just giving, having whatever you're doing, whether it's real estate or whatever, if you want to be ultra successful, it takes a lot of perseverance and push. And if you have the right mentors that have been successful, you can prevent going down the wrong path and wasting a lot of effort. But I would just say, really, if you want to be successful, and that's what I would impart, is it takes a lot of perseverance, and you have to decide. I tell my team this too. Listen, real estate development is not for everybody. It's extremely hard. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's very technical. It takes a lot of intelligence, and it's also, I think, one of the coolest careers there are, and you can build whatever world you want to build, but you can't, it's not for everybody. If you want to golf on Fridays, go into banking or something so that's what I would impart, is that if you want to be ultra successful, it takes a ton of hustle and perseverance.
Well, incredibly wise words, and you're proof of that. I can't thank you enough for your insight and perspective. Thanks for being on the show, Meg.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.